Amid the arid deserts of the Arabian Peninsula, a man was born destined to transform the course of history. Muhammad, the prophet of Islam, grew up in a world of conflict and division, but his calling brought a message of unity and faith that went far beyond his time. Although her story is not in the pages of the Bible, she has become one of the most influential in the world, shaping the lives and beliefs of millions of people. Today, we will delve into this story, from challenges to revelations, and explore the profound lessons that Muhammad's life offers us. Subscribe to the channel for more exciting biblical stories and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. If you like the content, don't forget to send a thanks a lot. And if you want to support the channel even more, become a member and gain access to exclusive benefits. In the scorching heat of the desert and the sound of the wind whispering through the sands, in a remote corner of the Arabian Peninsula, a child is born. In the midst of a time where tribal wars and stone gods dominated everyday life. It's the year 570 AD, and the city is Mecca, a bustling center of commerce, legends, and beliefs. This boy, called Muhammad, did not know his father, who left for the afterlife before he was born, leaving him in the care of his mother. But fate seemed determined to challenge this child from an early age. After losing his mother at a very young age, Muhammad was welcomed by his grandfather, a wise and respected man. At his grandfather's house, Muhammad observed everything with curiosity, as if every detail of that world revealed something important to him. I learned the value of words, respect, silence. However, fate had one more abrupt change in store for him. His grandfather would also leave him too soon, and he was taken to live under the protection of his uncle, Abu Talib, a well-known trader who traveled the desert routes. Little by little, Muhammad absorbed the free spirit of the Bedouins and understood the culture of the caravans, listening to the stories of travelers and rumors about other lands. Even as a child, he already felt that Mecca was not just a city, but a crossroads between the sacred and the profane, where people's souls seemed to cry out for something greater. As Muhammad grew up, Mecca was buzzing with the voices of various tribes and nations, a place where the dust of the desert mixed with the gold of merchants and the scent of spices that came from afar. But there was something that gave Mecca an even greater importance than its trade routes. In the heart of the city, imposing and silent, was the Kaaba, an ancient sanctuary surrounded by mysteries. It was a large stone cube, surrounded by idols representing the gods of each tribe. People have always come from far and wide to see the sanctuary, offering sacrifices, asking favors from the stone gods and trusting that somehow their prayers would be heard. And although the tribes fought for power and territory, around the Kaaba they all seemed the same, shrouded in the same mystery. This sacred place gave Mecca not only prestige, but also influence, something local leaders fiercely protected. Muhammad, observing this fervor in his youth, felt that there was something profound, but at the same time, incomplete. As grand as the rituals were and the celebrations were frequent, he noticed a lack, an absence of true meaning in the worship of those idols. It was as if the essence of something sacred was there, but covered by layers and layers of empty customs. The nights that Muhammad spent reflecting became more frequent, and a restlessness grew within him, like an ember about to turn into fire. Muhammad, now young, had a mixture of seriousness and compassion in his eyes, qualities that made him stand out amid the tumult of daily life in Mecca. Always willing to help and known for his honesty, he earned the respect of everyone around him. Therefore, when a rich and respected widow named Khadija heard about this young man with a generous heart and firm character, she decided to entrust her caravans of goods to him. It was a job of great responsibility, but Muhammad, with his dedication, not only accepted the challenge, but also executed it in an exemplary manner. The trust that Khadija placed in Muhammad grew, and the mutual respect between them soon transformed into something deeper. Fate, which had so often taken away his support in childhood, now seemed to offer him a chance for stability and affection. They married, and alongside Khadijah, Muhammad found a true companion, someone who not only believed in his capabilities, but who also supported his silent restlessness. Even with a stabilized life and prosperity around him, that feeling persisted, like a soft and constant shadow. The peace he felt at Khadijah's side did not erase the longing for answers, a longing that took him further and further away from the hustle and bustle of Mecca, towards the lonely hills and mountains that surrounded the city. He spent long periods on Mount Hira, where the silence seemed to tell him about things he still didn't fully understand. In the stillness of Mount Hira, enveloped by the dark blanket of night, Muhammad sought meaning for the restlessness that accompanied him. The city of Mecca, with its lights, noises, and religious practices, seemed distant, almost like a distant dream. There alone, he let himself be enveloped by the silence of the stars and the peace of the mountains. But on one of those nights, something unexpected and profound happened. It was as if the sky itself opened, and Muhammad felt an intense presence around him. Suddenly, a voice resounded, firm and powerful, breaking the silence in an almost palpable way. "Act!" Scared and confused, his heart raced like never before. He looked around but saw no one, only the wind passing by him like a gentle touch. He tried to understand what that meant, and the voice repeated, insistently, "Recite." It was then that, without knowing exactly how, Muhammad felt the words flow into his heart and mind. They came from somewhere deep, words that seemed far beyond himself, like a message from above. The experience left him stunned, almost breathless. He descended the mountain with his heart racing, feeling that he had just experienced something extraordinary, something that he himself could barely understand. When he arrived home, he found his first shelter in Khadijah, the comfort he needed to process everything that had happened. She listened to him attentively, without any shadow of a doubt, and her support was like an anchor in the middle of that unknown ocean. This first revelation would not be the last. Muhammad began to understand that he was facing a greater calling. The revelations continued, one after another, like waves coming and going, each bringing new words and new meanings. Muhammad, still surprised by the enormity of it all, began to understand that he could no longer keep what he heard and felt to himself. There was something urgent in his message, something that needed to be shared. He spoke about a single God, Allah, the creator of everything, who was not represented by statues nor limited by temples or tribes. It was a greater, invisible God who observed the world and people's hearts. The first to hear his message were those closest to him, his wife, Khadijah, his friend Abu Bakr, and some relatives. To these few, he spoke with an open heart, showing the faith that consumed him. And little by little, these few began to hear, to understand, and then to believe. But the group was small, almost invisible to the eyes of Mecca. And perhaps it would have remained like this, a small circle of faith, if it were not for Muhammad's courage in taking the word beyond the walls of his home. As he spoke, the words began to echo, and the city, previously quiet in its routine of commerce and idolatry, began to murmur about this man who dared to defy the stone gods. Local authorities and leaders were uneasy as Muhammad's message put at risk the very livelihood of Mecca, which had prospered in part thanks to the veneration of idols in the Kaaba. If people started to believe in a single God, what would happen to the worship of local gods? What would happen to the power of leaders? And so, what started as a whisper turned into a threat. Looks of suspicion appeared, and soon Muhammad and his followers would face not only questions, but also rejection and, little by little, persecution. Every day, Muhammad's voice resounded louder, and his circle of followers grew, but along with them, threats also grew. The leaders of Mecca, fearing for the stability of their power and the tradition that sustained the city, began to act. It was necessary to silence that voice before its influence became unsustainable. The attacks began subtly. Dirty looks, disdainful words, lost deals. But gradually the hostility turned physical. People were humiliated in the streets, separated from their families, forced to leave their homes. Muhammad observed everything with a mix of sadness and firmness. Every blow against his followers was like a blow to his own heart. He saw young Sumaya, one of the first Muslim women, being mistreated, and he felt the weight of his responsibility growing. Sumaya, fragile in the eyes of others, showed unusual strength, enduring pain in the name of her faith. Muhammad saw this courage in each of his followers, and this only encouraged him to continue, to resist. Allah's message needed to be heard, and he knew the price would be high. The leaders of Mecca did not stop there. They tried to tempt him with promises of wealth, of power, of anything that would make him give up this idea of a single God. They wanted him to surrender, to admit that everything was just an illusion, but Muhammad, with a serenity that seemed to come from another world, refused each offer. It was as if he saw something others didn't, a deeper vision, a purpose far greater than anything he had seen before, Mecca could offer. And then, with the failure of promises, came fury. The persecution intensified, and the attacks became cruel. But no matter how much the pressure increased, Muhammad kept a flame burning inside him, something that the leaders of Mecca could never understand or extinguish. The situation in Mecca was becoming unsustainable. Muhammad, even with his inner strength and unshakable faith, knew that his followers were increasingly exposed to violence, contempt, and daily threats. He saw the fear in the eyes of the families, the pain of those who had lost their loved ones, and he understood that remaining there, in that land where he was born, was increasingly dangerous for everyone. It was time to make a difficult decision, something that required courage as much as his mission, leaving. In this moment of uncertainty, a distant city called Yathrib, which would later become Medina, appears as a promise. It was a city divided by disputes between tribes, where the inhabitants heard about Muhammad and his message of peace and justice. In secret, some leaders of Yathrib sent messengers to him, offering him welcome and protection, asking him to come as a mediator in their conflicts and spiritual leader. This was a breath of hope, a chance for his followers to rebuild their lives without fear under a new horizon. But the journey there would not be easy. Upon learning of the intentions of Muhammad and his followers, the leaders of Mecca were on alert. They could not allow this faith to gain strength elsewhere, far from their control. They spread guards throughout the city, watching the roads and preparing ambushes to intercept the escape. Muhammad, however, had already planned everything carefully. He organized the departure of the Muslims in secret, in small groups, each leaving at nightfall like shadows, in silence, towards the promised safety. When his turn came, he left with his faithful friend Abu Bakr, leaving behind everything he knew. Under the vast, starry sky, the two walked through the desert, hiding from their pursuers, fleeing through narrow, hidden passages, dodging patrols. Those nights seemed endless, but with each step, Muhammad felt an invisible protection around him, something that guided him and gave him the strength to follow. Upon arriving in Medina, Muhammad and his followers were received with a mixture of curiosity and respect. For the inhabitants of that city, marked by tribal conflicts and mistrust, the Prophet represented more than a spiritual leader. He was a mediator, a hope for peace in a time of division. Soon, Muhammad realized that there, among these people so different from his people in Mecca, there was an opportunity to build something new. Calmly and wisely, he began to organize the community. Muhammad knew that for his message of faith to grow strong, it needed more than words. It needed a real union between hearts. And so, he established a series of guidelines that went far beyond spiritual issues. He created a pact between Muslims and local tribes, an agreement of protection and coexistence, where each group would respect the other and work for the good of all. This pact was revolutionary. In a land where revenge and blood feuds were the norm, there was now a promise of mutual respect. Muhammad also encouraged the practice of charity, support for the weakest, and respect for foreigners. Under his leadership, Medina began to transform, becoming a refuge not only for those who already believed in his message, but also for those seeking peace and justice. He was not just the prophet who guided with prayers, but the leader who built a society based on compassion and solidarity. Still, this new union was viewed with suspicion by many in Mecca. Every news of prosperity and harmony in Medina reached the ears of Meccan leaders as a threat, a reminder that Muhammad, now empowered and with loyal followers, represented a new power. And while in Medina, the Muslim community was consolidating, Mecca became increasingly restless. Peace in Medina was soon threatened. News of the unity of Muslims and the growth of the community reached Mecca like a call to war. The leaders of Mecca, furious at Muhammad's success and fearing that his influence would continue to grow, decided to act. The conflict seemed inevitable, and soon the first battles appeared on the horizon, marking the beginning of a new phase for the Muslims. The first of these battles was at Badr, a confrontation that no one imagined Muhammad would win. On one side, the warriors of Mecca, experienced and with an army 3 times larger. On the other, a small and unlikely group of Muhammad's followers, without the same strength or weapons. But there was something in them that went beyond the number of soldiers, a faith that made them see that fight as a sacred mission, a defense of what they believed in. Against all odds, the Muslims won at Badr, a victory that was seen as a sign, an answer to their prayers. However, Mecca would not accept defeat so easily. Other battles followed, such as that of Uhud, where the Muslims faced painful losses. Muhammad felt each loss as if it were his own, but he did not allow sadness to paralyze him. He understood that each battle was a trial, a test of his community's resilience and commitment. Thus, between unexpected victories and harsh defeats, the journey of Muhammad and his followers continued, in a fight that was not just for survival, but for the strength of a purpose that united them and made them persevere. After years of conflict and resistance, the long-awaited day has finally arrived. Muhammad, at the head of an army of thousands of followers, marched towards Mecca. That city that had once been his home now awaited him with fear and expectation. The once powerful leaders now saw the return of Muhammad and the Muslims as inevitable, as a wave they could no longer contain. But contrary to what they feared, the prophet did not come with the intention of revenge. When Muhammad and his army arrived at the gates of Mecca, the city was silent. He entered, not with weapons drawn, but with a heart determined to forgive. And upon arriving in front of the Kaaba, that sanctuary that for so long had been surrounded by idols and divided between tribes, Muhammad did something that would seal a new era. He ordered that all images and symbols of idolatry be removed, leaving the sanctuary dedicated only to the only God, Allah. Those who had once persecuted him now watched him in silence, stunned by his compassion. He forgave them, offering them a new beginning, a chance to join the new community he had built. There was no bloodshed, just a profound transformation, as if the city itself was being reborn. For Muslims, the conquest of Mecca was not just a victory, it was a symbol of unity and faith. And looking at that city now pacified, Muhammad knew that there was still much to be done. With Mecca now at peace, Muhammad's message gained strength and spread throughout the Arabian Peninsula. He sent messengers to distant tribes, leaders and kings, carrying with them letters that spoke about peace, justice, and the importance of Allah as the only God. His message was not just religious. It was a call to a life of compassion and solidarity, an invitation for each people to put aside disputes and unite for something greater. The response was diverse. Some kings responded with respect, others with indifference, and some even with hostility. But Muhammad was not intimidated. For him, the purpose continued to be greater than any barrier. He encouraged his followers to remain steadfast in the practice of faith, charity, and kindness toward others, and the community grew not just in numbers, but in strength and purpose. In every village they visited, every tribe that welcomed them, Muslims were guided by the example of Muhammad. He was the leader who not only talked about justice, but lived that justice, the man who walked side by side with the humble, who defended the orphans and the weak, who embraced the stranger and sought peace in every gesture. His leadership transformed lives, creating a community united by deep values that no longer depended on blood ties or old tribal alliances. But as Allah's message continued to gain ground and touch new hearts, Muhammad realized that his time among them might be approaching its end. In the last years of his life, Muhammad felt that his mission was being completed. The Muslim community, which began as a small group of persecuted believers in Mecca, now spread throughout Arabia, united, strong, and founded on the principles of justice and compassion that he had taught so much. Each day, every word of his message seemed to blossom into the actions and hearts of his followers. But even seeing all this, Muhammad knew that there was still something essential to share before leaving. In his last sermon, delivered before thousands of followers, Muhammad spoke with a calm and profound clarity. He reinforced the importance of equality among all, regardless of color, tribe, or wealth. He said that true greatness was in each person's character, in their ability to do good, to act with kindness and respect. He spoke about women's rights, justice for the oppressed, and reminded everyone of the duty to care for the most vulnerable. Those words echoed like a last offering, a legacy he left for his people. Shortly afterwards, in 632 AD, Muhammad fell ill. Surrounded by those closest to him, he remained serene, as if he was already envisioning the next stage of his journey. His last words were a reminder of faith and trust in Allah, a request for the community to remain united and steadfast in the teachings he had shared. And then, in peace, he left. And so, Muhammad left this world, but not before planting a seed that would continue to grow, strong and full of life, in the hearts of his followers. His story, marked by moments of loneliness, courage, and unshakable faith, became a legacy that transcends time. The young orphan from Mecca, who had once been rejected and persecuted, became the spiritual guide of a nation, the symbol of a faith that spoke of compassion and justice. There are profound lessons to learn from the life of Muhammad. He showed us that true leadership is an example, that power lies in serving others, and that the greatest courage is the one that allows us to move forward even in the face of adversity. Muhammad never used his position for his own benefit. On the contrary, he always thought about how to unite, strengthen, and care for his community. His life was a constant reminder that love and respect for all are the foundations of a just society, and that peace begins with justice. Furthermore, his journey teaches us about the importance of staying true to one's principles, even when the world around him seems to oppose him. Muhammad reminds us that every obstacle can become another step towards a greater purpose. His faith, more than a belief, was a source of strength that inspired those around him to also seek the best in themselves. And today, as we look at his story, we see that his legacy continues to guide us, showing that we all have the potential to transform the world around us. All it takes is a faithful heart and a sincere desire to do good. If you like the story of Muhammad and want to continue following other stories of faith and overcoming, be sure to like this video and share it with those you love. And of course, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new content. Together, let's explore more powerful lessons from the Bible.